allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Hi, Stephanie Sawyer. At this point, before we start, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Colley. This is his last meeting with us. And I can't express to him how helpful he has been to me. And although we may not always have the same opinion about all of the issues, he's always very helpful and understanding. And I want him to know that I appreciate everything he's done for me in the last 2 years and the town for however many years you have been involved. Thank you very much. We have no appointments, so we'll move to the town administrator report.
I'm going to forgo that today. My report would simply state that I've been working on the budget and the warrant with the finance team, the accountant, the treasurer for the past several weeks. That has been our day in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening.
Great. Are there any select board updates or liaison reports? No. School committee's meeting right now, so I can't tell you what they're talking about. Reports from departments, boards, or committees? No. No?
I can't get this more, so.
Okay. Open time for the public? Nobody? All right. So we will move on to the appointments. We have an appointment of Russell Ducharme Jr., the alternate building commissioner. The purpose of this appointment is to create additional backups in the event that our current commissioner, Tom Quinlan, is out sick or on vacation. There's no cost associated with this appointment. If an alternate is called, he receives $40 per inspection per office hour. I have his application for employment and a job description, a resume. Heather, does anyone know him?
Tom does. Tom was the one who found him when he was at a previous building commissioners meeting a few weeks ago.
Sure.
They had suggested that it's very wise to have numerous alternates in the event that you need one available, because you never know, if Peter's out sick, you don't know if Sally can cover.
So currently he's the building inspector in January, is that what this is?
I believe so. I passed the papers that way.
Yeah, he has it. And don't we already have an alternate? Who's that?
We do
other
have one, but again, at the Building
Right.
Commissioners Association, they recommended having numerous ones in the event that one may not be available, the second one can cover.
one? Okay.
He's also the interim commissioner over, I guess, since 2012.
Are there any other questions regarding this appointment?
He has all the appropriate qualifications and licensing.
All of his certificates and everything are attached to his actual application. That is before whoever has it.
Okay, are these the appropriate ones?
Yes.
In regards to Tom, he's finished everything, right?
He's finishing. He still has one test to pass. Right now with the building commissioners, they're finding it's almost impossible for folks to pass the test. So you have a lot of people right now who are kind of in limbo. They're still working on passing it, so in the meantime, we're still paying the gentleman from Easthampton on a biweekly basis for coverage as oversight. They're doing what they can. Like I said, my understanding is no one's passing the test right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to appoint Russell Ducharme Jr. as the alternate building commissioner?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next appointment is Colby Matthew Brown to the Greenway Committee. Mr. Brown submitted his volunteer application. It was reviewed by the Greenway Committee, and he met with the Greenway Committee. He wishes to be appointed as a Greenway Committee member, and the Greenway Committee wishes to have him as such. David has his application for volunteer position, if anyone would like to look at it.
How long has he been in town? I'm just curious.
We don't have a question for that.
I'm just curious. Is he related to the Browns that are in that area, Manhattan and such?
There's no question for that either.
Okay.
Well, he lives in Maine.
That's what I'm saying. I just-
Very possible.
I think it's the same address.
So is there a motion to appoint Colby Matthew Brown to the Greenway Committee? Is there a second? Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is a PCF for the resignation of Kevin, is it Towell? Towell, of Kevin Towell from Heather's office. I just needed a motion to approve the PCF. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to give a letter of appreciation.
Is there a second to send a letter of appreciation?
Second.
Any other discussion? Heather, could you write that letter? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next is a PRF for the health agent position. The Board of Health had previously spoken to this board, and the Board of Selectmen had no reservations to the Board of Health moving forward on the position prior to sign off by this board, provided that the Finance Committee and the PQB also signed off. Both have signed off at this point, and it's just a formality to sign the form. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
We have no licenses, no contracts, no other documents requiring signature. Next is the approval of the annual town meeting warrant, which is, the annual town meeting is Tuesday, May 19th at 7 o'clock at the Norris School. The Board of Selectmen previously reviewed most items on the warrant at our prior meeting. We need to ensure that we wish to move forward on these articles as is, and it will be submitted to council today to be signed at the end of the week. Also, we have the finalized budget as part of the annual town meeting to approve. At this point, I'll turn it.
Yes, I just got word that we actually have someone in the audience here for something for the boards, committees, commissions.
Oh, excellent.
Under
So why
that
don't we
section?
go backwards a minute and move right over to there?
Why not? Okay, Doric Dodd's Greenway Committee. And what is going on is that this committee, being an ad hoc nature, is different from the other committees I'm involved with, primarily in the way that we can disperse funds or commit to contracts. I don't think I know all the details about how to proceed, but basically we now have one of our due diligence functions to take care of for the Greenway acquisition. This particular one is the Phase 1 environmental assessment. The successful bidder, as far as we're concerned, is Ty and Bond right down the street. Best quote by far, incidentally, and they happen to have somebody available right now to begin the project. We have their firm proposal here, but apparently we cannot personally or within our committee sign this contract, so I wonder who can, or if I might be delegated to do that.
I would say the Board of Selectmen needs to sign it. Can we take a look at it?
Heather, did you ever look at this contract prior?
Do we what?
Did you look at this contract prior?
I haven't seen,
You haven't seen it?
I don't have this in front of me, so.
Okay, this is the one where they didn't have the text defining the project, otherwise the body of the document is the same. And later edition.
Is there a date that this needs to be signed by?
Can you give us some weeks?
Right, can we look at it and have Heather look at it and then
Just,
make
Ts
sure we're
and
not?
Is and all that kind of good stuff?
What we have as a disadvantage then is a later start from the engineering people who are assessing this. What they're trying to do is get out to the site before the leaves pop up because it helps them in their assessment. In effect, we're looking to see if there's anything toxic out there. If we act faster, so much the better. If it can't be done that way,
Well, I want to make sure we do things.
Well, contracts are contracts, so what's in there is binding, so we need to make sure it's what we agree to.
Am I correct to think that we might be meeting on Monday?
We haven't discussed that yet, but if not, we have a regular meeting on Tuesday. So regardless, Tuesday will be here.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think we should just say yes to it because there's a lot of contractual obligations.
So if it would be okay, Mr. Dodds, can we hold on to it and look at it and review it and then get back with it either on Monday or Tuesday?
okay, them's the odds. And I should also at least point out that this is something for which funding is already secured. It's not a new commitment
Right.
budget-wise.
Okay. Would you like, is this a copy? Do you have?
Oh, yeah, it was a PDF anyways.
Okay, so I can give this to Heather. Okay.
Hey, Doric, who's the chair of the Greenway Committee?
Chair is Mike Buell.
Okay, Mike?
I'm the vice chair, so.
Okay.
that's what I'm
can you add me to the distribution list? I'm supposed to be on the committee. I haven't gotten anything yet.
Negotiation.
But just the Greenway
Business
Committee in
Greenway.
general.
Greenway versus the negotiation, I believe you're.
Is that
appointed to
different?
Negotiation, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so who's the chairman of the negotiation part of it?
People West.
April West? So I'll give April West then. Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
All right. You ready for me?
Now we're ready.
All right, so we have the draft of the warrant. At this time, we were hoping to have more of a finalized warrant, but we've been looking at making sure we got everything we needed on the warrant. We actually had an article come in yesterday from the Water Department, and we also were trying to, recently, there was legislation passed to allow for the establishment of a tax title revolving fund that affects the treasurer collector's office, which allows when she has to handle properties, it's a revolving fund, so she doesn't have to actually have the money in the budget in the first place. Whatever she takes in, she spends. So that's why it's a revolving fund concept. As of recent years, we haven't been funding her high enough that she's been able to do multiple properties, and she has a lot coming up that she needs to take care of. And she can do that with this fund. Again, it's a new piece, and it took us a little bit longer because we wanted to make sure we got the language right. We're still not 100% sure, but when we send it to town council, at least it's, you know, in draft form as opposed to, please design an article for me regarding this. If we go through this briefly, I'll just walk you through it. I've worked very closely as well with Donna, Vicky, and also the town clerk on a couple things. There were some questions as we got later into the warrant pertaining to Prop 2.5 items, whether it be an override or whether it be a capital expenditure or debt exclusion. The concept there, and we confirmed it with the state elections division, is the same thing as we talked about last year. Prop 2.5 stuff requires 2 steps. One step is the appropriation at town meeting. And remember, the only way an article goes forward to town meeting is it's voted by the Board of Selectmen to be placed on the warrant for town meeting, with the exception of things that the residents can bring forward as their own articles. The second step is a referendum piece, which is the election. Again, it only makes it to a ballot question in the event that the Board of Selectmen votes to put it on the ballot for a question. These 2 steps, it doesn't matter which you have first or which you have second. There is a deadline in September that you have to meet for the election piece for both things to have happened to be finalized in order to set the tax rate. Other than that, it does not matter what you go first with. You can do the appropriation at town meeting, you can do the referendum for the election, either or, in whichever order, doesn't matter as long as you have both that say yes ultimately. We also did some research and we realized, I think the article's already drafted in that form, but we have to be careful and make sure we include the language contingent upon referendum, because if the referendum doesn't pass and we do not have the language of contingency, then we're stuck with having to find a way to fund something without having the funds for it. So we have to be very careful with that. That's included in here. With that being said, I'm just going to run down these real quick. So the first section is awards, Article 1 and Article 2. Article 1 is presentation of educational awards for the students from the Highway Department. Article 2 pertains to presentation of certificates. That's something the town clerk's working on. And it simply says for those at home to see if the town will vote to hear presentations of state certificates or take any action related thereto. The next section is administrative. We have 2 items under this section. The first one is to change the treasurer-collector's position to an appointed position. This is the same article verbatim that was on last year. I do not have any commentary under it at this point. If the board wishes to put such, please let me know, and I will happily include that. The next article is Article 4, Adopt Tax Title Revolving Fund MGL Provisions. This is one of those pieces where you have to first accept the Mass General Law, and then second, you have to create the revolving fund. So that's done later in the article. So the first piece, Adopt Tax Title Revolving Fund, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 15B, and to authorize the town accountant to establish a tax title collection revolving fund for the treasurer-collector or take any action related thereto. So that's the administrative section. Any questions on that section so far? Okay. We can do whatever. You'll see as we get down lower, we have a lot of revolving fund stuff, and I was trying to keep it collected. In the note here, I do make a comment that says this step is under the revolving fund section, so people know to look for it down below. I guess when I create things, I try to make it in as logical order as makes sense, at least makes sense to me, which doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense to everybody else.
Is this one of the requirements of the auditors?
This is not one of the requirements of the auditors. This is a brand-new law that came out. It's not per se that someone's advising against it or for it. It makes a lot of sense to have, and it actually makes our treasurer's life a lot easier to have. It's very restrictive as to what can go into it and what can come out of it. And we've been looking at the legislation now, I think, for 3 days, which is really fun reading. But we will put a copy of that either attached to this document or included in this blurb, whichever seems to be the most reasonable.
They just passed this in December of 2014, so we don't have any IGRs currently. There are laws working on those.
What's our view?
Silly acronym. Informational guideline release.
Okay.
And we will only have to, that part that Heather was talking about right now, we only have to do that one time. We don't have to do that every year. But because this is spanking brand new, we should put that on.
Okay. The next section is fiscal year FY15 budget. We have 2 items that are on this. Article 5 is the transfer of operating stabilization, and then I have A and B. Why did I break it out like that? I don't know. I guess I just like different.
You have 2 articles.
It's supposed to be A and B, but it's very possible. Again, this is the draft, so my counting isn't up there yet.
That's good, because she skipped 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so let's not worry about the
I
number.
move things around, you know. I got a little creative. You might have 4 in the middle somewhere. So anyway, it gives you the definition of the operating stabilization accounts, and the current balance for operating stabilization is $261,534.93 from what I saw on the reports, but Vicki will help me check that tomorrow. The first article is to transfer $15,000 in order to cover our encumbered legal expenses. We budgeted $22,500 this year for FY15, and we've been averaging about $1,000, give or take, a month. We do have a project that the Board of Selectmen has endeavored, and as a result, the costs we're looking at close to about $17,000, give or take, for that, plus or minus a little bit. We don't know yet. It's not complete. That being the case, we may have a little left over from that $22,500 to cover some of it, but we're not, right now I think we're already at about $15,000, give or take, so we're not going to be able to cover the full 17 with what we have balanced, and we don't want to end up with a deficit at the end of the year. The second item is transfer for $10,000 to the Police Department communication wages. Communication wages last year, for FY14 to FY15, were funded with a reduction at $172,000 and some change. The problem comes into play is we've looked at the stats over the past several years. We also talked to the police chief, and he provided us with great documentation that actually calculates out the communication wages. And at the minimum, most of the time, we're looking at about $184,000. So if we put in $10,000, we get us a little bit closer to $182,000, which means in the end of the day, if we still have to cover, we only have to cover $2,000 as opposed to looking for $12,000 somewhere in a very tight budget this year.
What are we going to do for next year's?
Next year I'll get to when we get to the budget.
Okay. So you've already taken it into consideration? Okay.
Absolutely. Any other
It's
questions?
at the same place.
Pardon?
You have it in front of you. in the
Yeah,
original.
but I
It's
just-
in the same place,
yeah.
184.
Okay.
All right, so the next thing is the fiscal year FY16 budget. What I did here is I kind of organized a little bit different than we've done in the past for a couple of reasons. First thing I did was I put on the resident petition for the health agent. The reason I put that article first is because that's a financial article, and if that's voted positively in affirmativeness, then that means it's going to affect the budget that comes 4 lines later, give or take, and we're going to need to do some adjustments on the floor. So this gives us a little time to do it, plus this being in consideration makes more sense first than having the budget voted and then going back and having to reopen an article.
So time out before you go. I would like to know what the moderator thinks about that, Mr. Moderator.
I agree, because we're not going to reopen an article to include an article after, so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The next couple of items are all for revenue side. The reason I put these first, again, it seemed the most logical that you want to have the revenue voted in before you spend the money. Because if the revenue is not voted affirmatively or if something changes, it's going to change your expenditures on the next page. So first you have the WPAT loan repayment. This is $20,401 to fund the amortization of WPAT bonds. We do this every year. It comes from the WPAT loan repayment account. The next item is $75,000 to fund the EMS ambulance-related expenses. We take this from the ambulance fees account. We've been doing this every year as well. These are the monies we bring in from using the ambulance service and billing. Over the past several years, we used different amounts of money to fund it. We've funded sometimes at 125, sometimes at 60, sometimes at 50, and now we're at 75. We thought that was the most reasonable number. Only last year did we start actually moving the money from a certain portion of the money from this account over to what we created last year, which was an ambulance stabilization fund for the pure purpose of purchasing a new ambulance in the future.
Question.
Yes, answer.
Police department, there's $10,000 we pull out of that every year for subsidizing the first responders in the police department.
Yes, so we
Is that
can't,
part of it?
it is not because we can't do it. We were told by the auditors it is not part of what they consider ambulance-related funds.
I have a question, at the risk of making a longer conversation. If these are voted yes before the budget, do you have to then balance the budget at the town meeting that night?
Well, the budget, if these are voted, let's put it this way, the revenue was based on the idea that these two things are going to be voted affirmatively. These two things are already in the budget, and they're what we use to balance the budget. So if these two things, say for whatever reason, the town decides, no way are you doing that 2401, no way are you doing $75,000, you're going to have to find it somewhere else, then at that case, we now have $95,000 of an unbalanced budget.
So you're telling me that the health agent is budgeted?
Oh, no, you're back up there, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were on Article 5.
I was on all of them, I kind of grouped them together, but
So we don't know, we need to speak with town council to figure out the effects of Article Resident Petition Health Agent. If it passes, what is the direct effect? If, for instance, it's presumed,
How much is on the line now? How much is
35,000, so this would increase it by 3,000. But the problem becomes, based on the way the article is written, what does this mean as it's written? Does it mean it's going to add to the current article or the current line item that's already there? Does it mean it's going to supplant it and replace it? Does it mean something entirely different? The other problem is this wasn't submitted with or take any action related thereto. Mr. Moderator, correct me if I'm incorrect here, but usually if it's missing that line, you're kind of stuck.
Robert Floyd, 15 East Street. I, as moderator, do not allow an increase of budget. So as it appears to me, although I have not been given a copy of the finances for the town meeting, it is a public document, I have not been given a copy. But when an item is more money or somebody tries to raise a line item, that's not proper, that's out of the scope. A motion can be made to lower an amount that's in the budget, that's in a line item. So theoretically, somebody would stay home if they thought a certain expense would be $30,000. But if somebody in the meeting raised it or amended or tried to amend it by $5,000, that person might want to come to the meeting and have their say. So historically, we don't allow an increase in the budget. So it appears to me this item for the health department passing, then the provision would be for the delta to be considered for a 2.5 override.
I see. So it's not like you're in the meeting and you say, okay, now we have to figure out what other line item you're going to take $3,000 from before you balance it.
Some towns have tried that, borrow from Peter to pay Paul, and it's up for grabs, and it's a simple downward slope, and it isn't good. So our history is that we don't allow it, and to continue with keeping a transparent government, I personally, as town moderator, will not allow it. So,
a motion to the article, can you make a motion to the article from the floor if it's by petition?
you can make, anybody can make a motion amendment.
So we can't touch this article, but people that...
No, you can. Once you close this warrant and you sign it, your job is done. And so you're an individual, as a select person, you're an individual, you can make an
So
amendment.
this article could be amended from the floor to say pending approval by a 2.5 override. or something.
Yes.
So that's what would happen. You would approve the line item in the budget as stated, and then the extra would have to be a vote as an override.
Right,
Okay.
and as Dr. McDougall insinuating, the article is simply four corners. The motion is meant to be under that umbrella of those four corners, and that can solve the problem of an incorrectly worded article. And a petitioner doesn't receive town council's punctuation corrections. So the motion, working with the moderator or not, is meant to take out the rough edges and go with the intent and make it work.
Okay,
Cheers.
thank you. Can we just go back to the fact that you don't have a budget? Do you usually get one before this?
I've always received a copy of the budget when there's a discussion about the town meeting, so yes, I have not received one this year.
Could we get one to Mr.
As soon
Floyd?
as I've been asked for anything, I always turn it over. We haven't finished the budget, we haven't finished the warrant, so we haven't mass distributed.
Okay,
But should someone have a question and want a copy, Mr. Floyd was correct, and he said it is public record, and that is true.
Mr. Floyd, sorry.
The moderator should not have to ask for a copy of any document that's going to be part of a town meeting.
Once
Could we-
finalized, I will happily provide it to him on the request of the board. I'm happy to give him a copy prior to it without him asking.
But it's not gonna be a correct copy.
But that's what I'm saying, is, he got a copy of the warrant last time we discussed it. We made some modifications pretty much at the last second tonight, so we didn't mass distribute it, still in draft form, and the budget is still in draft form, where things could modify and change.
Could we give him one to peruse until it's final?
We can. If he wants to come into the office tomorrow, I'm happy to. I did ask him and invite him into my office for Monday, but I didn't hear back.
So make sure whatever copies go out, at this point, it's clearly marked as draft. Just because if the copy does go out, the media gets a hold of it, this is a copy of the town budget, but it's not.
Mhm.
So it just,
You can copy the draft petition too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So, moving forward, so Article 11 and 11, because apparently I'm writing numbers duplicate here on the bottom page 3, we just finished those.
2 Article 5, so I wasn't gonna say.
Well, I've changed the way I've typed the warrants, so they're no longer automatically numbering. So every time I move something, my numbers are off. Article 12 is the transfer station. I'm actually going to let Vicki explain this one a little bit with regards to the indirect costs, because I think there was questions that had come from Ed last time.
Ed, did you have questions?
Yeah,
Because
I
Vicki
think we
looks
talked
like-
about it before, the indirect costs and the transfer station.
I guess I wasn't sure if you were talking about why we were splitting the indirect costs up.
No, I think his question was pertaining to why the indirect cost is not as high as he thought it should be.
For the,
That was with
Oh.
regards to including Randall's.
The transfer
Actually, I
station.
think these are titled wrong. The first one, Article 12, should be the transfer station. I mean, it should be the
water department, yep.
And the other one should be the transfer.
Correct.
Yeah, they're backwards.
Well,
I'm just curious, because, our numbers are much higher. You explained to me.
The numbers were much higher, and one of the things that, we need to, I guess, discuss and what you want as a board is, we haven't actually, back to 2008, when the highway superintendent, which was yourself, was getting a separate stipend for transfer station. It was being charged directly to the transfer station. But since 2008, in David's calculations, I went back and looked at all of his papers, he never charged the transfer station for any of your salary after it became one big salary.
But I did when I put the budget together and the indirect costs.
No, I have those indirect costs, it wasn't in there.
But Vicki, just to be clear, you're talking about Mr. Keelson, the former.
Correct, David Keelson, the former town accountant, yes.
David, I'm saying, I'm just.
Oh, no. Because I went through all of his pieces.
Calculations, whether it's titled there or not, was included because it was, in order to develop the salary, the board wanted all, any stipends combined into one.
Correct, and so when I went back and looked at the past year's calculations, computations that Dave Keelson, the former town accountant, did, the salary line was only the salary line that was, the salary line was, just the salary line from what was in the transfer station, and it was, the percentage was, for the insurances and stuff, was calculated that way, but there was no, unless you included, if you had $75,000 for salaries, I don't,
I don't know what we did with it, but when did my calculations and put them together, that was in there, you know, the equipment use was in there.
And the equipment use is in there, basically how it,
Any
Right.
manpower benefits were all included, but when I saw the drop in revenue, I was kind of surprised that much was taken out.
well, I guess how the calculation had worked previously was whatever the salary budget was for the transfer station, it would be multiplied by a prorated percentage of insurance divided by the total number less the school's salary costs to get a fringe benefit number. And then the fringe benefit number was calculated, it was multiplied by whatever the salary totals were for the budget for the transfer station.
I understand what you're saying.
I know, but so if that number of the transfer station had your salary in it, I guess I don't know that. So if this was just for the guys to work there, then that's all that was calculated.
I mean, when the transfer station, when the revolving funds and the enterprise funds were established, all costs associated with each one of those funds that was associated with the town was to be reimbursed. And, you know, there was, you know, the sizable amount of my salary was part of that, and that's why it was included. So I'm just saying,
So.
in the future, it's got to be looked at because it's not doing justice to the town.
So we can, you know, going forward, or we can amend this here, we can, I guess I would keep it as a separate line item for Randall's salary, because it's going to be a percentage of his time. I'm not going to take his salary and multiply it by the 27 or 33% fringe rate, because that's already included in the general fund.
Whatever
So.
the stipend was, which was, I think, $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah, I forget how much it was. I went back and looked.
I included that, and that was used to develop the salary.
So going forward, now that we understand that that was never done before, at least as far as I can see from what David's calculations were, then we can keep that as a separate line item, and that would definitely increase this. The other piece I did was I divided out the fringe benefits for all the other insurances and then the health insurance. And I split it out this year because, you know, the attendants that are getting paid $10 an hour, the part-time people, and David aren't taking insurance, so I split those out as a different type of calculation. So,
I understand what you
Yep.
did, I just wanted to know.
so we
There
can,
was such a big drop, and then it started, we had a discussion.
Yeah.
We talked about it. I said, geez, you never put the salary in there, and that would have made up some.
and we didn't, I didn't, but when I looked back at David's calculations, his wasn't, as far as I could see, included in either, but, you know, we should. We should.
I took all my numbers.
Yes.
And I didn't break them out. I broke them out on my side and left them there, but I just gave him indirect costs because that's all he wanted. And it was an estimate.
Yeah.
Because he was gonna go back because the workman's comp and
Yep.
the fringe benefit was such a fluid thing, went back
Yep.
and forth 4 or 5%
Yep.
a year. So, you know, that was up for him to calculate.
Right. So I think, you know, you made an excellent point, is that we should be charging some of Randall's time, whether it's 10%, 8%, whatever that figure Randall needs to determine, we can do that, and that would make this increase for sure. And we should do that.
That's all I'm saying.
So, you know, we definitely need to be able to do that now that it's been, now that it's been reviewed, to say, hey, you know, we haven't really done that, and we probably should, and so, but there is a time for my time and Donna's time,
Yeah.
and all that's already included in that, so.
There's even a percentage of the annual report that's in it, supposedly.
So
The
before
whole
you
document.
move
I
forward
guess,
with this article, do you want to, can we get with Randall to change that number, or do you want to leave the number this year and we'll?
You know, I went through and we talked about it, and I went through and recalculated it, and it came up to, you know, like 13 or 14,000. It added like about another $6,000 worth from his salary onto this, so.
At this point, they gave, I think it was $6,000 helps.
Which that, in effect, would change the other side of the budget, the expense part of the budget, because this comes in, as you know, as revenue to offset those expenses for, you know, the fringes for workman's comp, health insurance, liability insurance, all that kind of stuff.
So do you want to make that change and
Well,
recalculate?
it's still a work in progress right now, you final.
No, it is
Still a work in progress, correct? So why don't, can we change those
We
things?
can go
and-
back, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for her putting you on the spot.
No, that's fine, we changed the format of how we listed this, enterprise funds on here, and I thought that's what she was talking about, so I was a little confused.
I'm sorry, I wasn't
That's
clear.
okay. That's fine.
At this time, I know the Finance Committee is coming down just to hang out in the audience because they wanted to hear the rest of the warrant talk, so I'm seeing if there's anything else I can jump into here. If we can skip to Article 20 real quick. It's on page 6. This is the Community Preservation section. The overall title of this whole piece is Fiscal Year FY16 Appropriations. Article 20 is Community Preservation. Just give a little example or explanation. Says the following articles have all been submitted by the Community Preservation Committee. The current balances for each account are as follows. I don't know if we have those, but we'll see. For the Finance Committee who's just joining us, I'm just skipping to Article 20. I was waiting for you guys to come down before we got to the budget piece. So you have transfer of funds for undesignated. This is for $10,000 to fund the operating expenses of the Community Preservation Commission. It's a standard one they do pretty much every year. The next one is undesignated as well, and this one pertains to transfer the amount of $18,752.89 to fund the completion of an additional project for Labrie Field. It was an outstanding amount there. They have not voted on this one yet. They are meeting, I believe, next Wednesday. But when speaking with Virginia, we had thought it wise to put the article on, and worst comes to worst, if it gets passed over, it gets passed over, but at least it's on there. The next item is transfer of, and that actually should say FY15 for that one. So I don't know what we'll do with that. Next one is transfer of funds, historical preservation account. This one's $5,000 to the Veterans Grave Officer to fund purchase of 10 flat markers for the veterans' graves. D is transfer of funds, historical preservation account, $1,500 to the Veterans Grave Officer for the restoration of Revolutionary War and Civil War veterans' monuments. E is transfer of funds, historical preservation account, $10,500 to the Cemetery Commission to be used for the restoration of the Judd Memorials in the Center Cemetery. F, transfer of funds, historical preservation account, $11,000 to the Board of Selectmen to be used for the installation of automatic doors, door openers, for the double set of external doors for the Council on Aging doors, and for the main entrance door to the Town Hall to meet accessibility standards for the Town Hall Larrabee Building. Transfer of funds, open space account. This has to do with $1,000 to the Conservation Commission to be used to fund signs for ZIPTA Conservation Area Trails, and that's coming from Community Preservation Surcharges Open Space account. Any question on the CPA articles?
On the cemetery ones, is Vic Prairie going to be presenting that?
I believe Virginia Ahar presents all of CPA articles as the chair of the CPC. If you guys can entertain me a little bit and just backtrack now, back to Article 14, because the Finance Committee has joined us. So this is the Omnibus FY16 budget. It's our typical article we put on here. We usually attach the budget at the end, unless anyone feels it's absolutely necessary to go on a side road now to the budget. I want to hold this one to the end and see how far you guys want to get into it at this time. The next article, Article 15. So now we get into the Prop 2.5 pieces. As we spoke about earlier, there's two parts to it. There's the referendum, which is an election, and there is the appropriation, which is the town meeting. Both require the Board of Selectmen to decide to move forward with them. One to put it on as a ballot question and one to put it on as a warrant article. Does not matter, again, which order these two things come in. It is entirely up to the Board of Selectmen if they wish to move forward with putting these forward to the annual town meeting. Maybe there's reason to hold things off. Maybe there's reason that we no longer need something we thought we did. Regardless, we have 3 items on here for Prop 2.5 overrides. One is to add the second shift advanced life support for the fire department. That comes at the cost of $135,000. The next item, as a potential, is, as requested by the board for us to look into, the cost of $63,000 to maintain one police officer. This amount includes $13,000 for employee benefits, such as health insurance and the like, and it also includes all the costs of hiring, training, etc. for that one police officer. The third option on here, Liz had asked me to look into the educational department to see if they'd be interested in putting on an article or having an article supported as well. I did contact Craig, who is the superintendent of schools. They have a school committee meeting this evening. I do not know which way they wish to proceed, if they wish to ask the Board of Selectmen to put an article on or not. I'm not sure. They won't know until the meeting concludes itself. However, for the time and purposes being, I have penciled it in as articles, I hope, the only Article 17. That being the case at this point, does the board have any thought on keeping or deleting Articles 15 through 17, that being the second shift advanced life support for 15, 16 being the police officer, and 17 being the elementary school?
Is the elementary school for operating expenses?
We wouldn't know. They haven't talked about it. They're discussing it tonight. So I won't know one way or the other till tomorrow morning if they even have any desire to go that direction.
Did they voice some sort of need that they had specifically? Or
The concern comes down to, as always, we're trying to keep a very close eye this year on net school spending. As we've talked about in the past, there's two pots. The first pot is for Hampshire Regional School. We're all set. We're meeting net school spending. The second pot is the local schools. So that includes Norris, Smith Vocational, charter schools, school choice, and what we know as indirect cost. That being the case, Smith Vocational this year went up. Last year, if you recall, in January, we had a special town meeting because Smith students weren't attending Smith School, Smith Vocational, as they had planned, and therefore, we were not meeting as much of net school spending as we should because the drop in attendance rate. Last year, we had originally budgeted $830,000. With all said and done, we believed it would cost no more than $750,000, which is approximately $70,000 drop with the attendance rate. This year, we have to budget at $939,000. That includes every student who's currently signed up, students who are currently attending, and includes the cost for all special ed programs. That being the case, we again do not believe that they will meet their $939,000 that have been allocated. The problem becomes there's not much we can do. Remember, last year was only $830,000. This is a $109,000 leap from last year's original allocated number, which means that's $109,000 we're not starting out the day putting into Norris.
Well, I guess my question is if this is for an operating expense, it could get just lost in the general fund and come around next year's budget. That that increase may get lost. And if you don't fund whatever they have been doing, they would still be behind. Correct me if my logic is
So I think we talked about that at the last meeting. First, let me say that the reason I asked for her to check into this was because at the school committee meeting that we were at maybe 2 months ago, when they first presented their budget, there was a new position in it. And one of the members of the school committee said, perhaps the thing to do here is to ask for an override in order to support new positions, because it's obvious that the budget that the town has currently can't afford to start adding positions. This was something in the special ed department. Of the special ed department, yes. And so that idea kind of manifested itself into the fire department asking for an override, the police department asking for an override. I think that my intention was that if you're going to ask the town to decide where they want to spend their money, it is only fair that you offer that to the school as well. And I don't know what they're going to decide to do, and I will leave my own personal opinion out of it, but I think in fairness, if they want to add a staff member, then they need to have the option to do that in the same way that the other departments are doing that.
Can I ask the finance? So if the way my mind's working is that, for fiscal year 16, this will be fine. It pays for whatever it costs. It goes specifically, that 2.5 goes specifically for that item. But the following year, that 2.5 increase gets sort of lost in the general fund. And then we go back to whatever budget that we had set, and we level fund them again. So does that position become a jeopardy and they're already in the hole?
I think, can I just speak to that for 1 second? We had talked about that at the last meeting, and we had talked about the process that was followed this year and the format that was used and followed, and said to the police chief, when we talked about it, I think that this money will be earmarked as not able to be cut from your budget because this is why we passed it in the first place. In years past, the process and the, for lack of a better term, the paper trail that was used was not sufficient enough to say, you know, there's $50,000 extra dollars because of an override and it should go to the police department. I think that we're relying on the paperwork and the process that was established this year to ensure that any money that's passed for an override continues to stay with that department.
Because isn't that, I mean, is that legal to sort of allocate money to a budget that's not existent yet? That you're already sort of earmarking?
I don't know what you mean by not existent yet, but as far as the,
Fiscal-wise 17, that budget has not been drawn up.
so I think what Liz is saying is the idea is now that we're starting to make sure we're tracking all of our finances and be on the same page, that we're looking at utilizing good faith. So the idea is, you know, we have it on the document. Here's a silly example. We allocated an additional $1,500 to the treasurer's office for expenses for the purposes of upgrading their point software. Okay, that's $1,500. Now, next year, not knowing any better, we might level fund it. But because we've documented everything, it specifically says on her page, we've added a one-time expense of $1,500 for the purposes of purchasing the software upgrade. So I think the same thing goes for anything that would happen here, is we would document it. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You're correct in your premise, David, that when you first vote the Prop 2.5 and you say we're going to buy Liz a new chair with the Prop 2.5 funds, we have to buy Liz a new chair. However, the following year, we don't have to put the money into Liz's new chair. It goes into the general fund. It's up to us to act as officials and representatives of the town to be in good faith to put the money where it was originally voted to go.
Well, that goes, you know, I was just looking at that original, so the second Article 5, the 38,000, that's for fiscal year 16. The following year, fiscal year 17, that position could be the 35,000 because the override was only for fiscal year 16.
You're looking at something totally different, David. What you're talking about is not an override, you're talking about an article.
But an article is setting a wage line for one fiscal year. You're setting.
Not on an override.
No, but what I'm saying is there's an article that says this year in fiscal wise 16, the health agent is going to be making $38,000. And that's what the article says. Fiscal wise 16, $38,000, even though it's financed $3,000 less. That's just for fiscal year 16. Fiscal year 17, you can put any wage in there because that article is not.
And that's an article.
But that's
what I'm saying as an example. And then when you look at this, that you're going to finance a position for fiscal year 16, technically it goes away in fiscal 17.
It doesn't by the override.
The override will go away because it goes back to the general fund.
The override is
No,
permanent.
but I'm saying the money will be there,
Right.
but where it gets allocated to.
And that's where we're saying the,
That's true, because you're gonna have a budget revision, so you're gonna approve a budget that gives the police department a certain amount of money. If the override passes, there's now a budget revision that's added into his budget, so that next year he starts with that additional amount. We had other budgets that had revisions at the school department, because we had to give them additional money for net school spending. So they started with that amount this year as we did the budget. So the police department will start with that amount.
But he always runs behind,
Okay.
he always runs behind his finances.
So I think we might be getting off topic a little bit.
Well, I don't think we're getting off topic because we got to decide if we want these on or off. And, you know, to follow up with what Dave says, what Amanda says is accurate in that it'll show a $63,000 increase this year. Next year, it'll be $63,000 in the police budget, but we can say that 63 stays there, but you need to cut another 50 from somewhere else. So technically, it does get lost in there after the first year. I agree with you. There's no way that it's going to be there for forever because you take away from the other part of the budget. It's smoke and mirrors, really, I think.
I guess what I would say is it's no different than how things are today. So I have X number of dollars in my current budget for my salary. Next year, it could be cut down to nothing. Well, there's no guarantee, and just because I get it this year doesn't mean I'm going to get it next year. There's no difference
But this
between
is
that
a-
and the Prop 2.5 piece.
A debt exclusion, which goes on forever. So
But
we're-
it's not a debt exclusion, it's a Prop 2.5
Prop 2.5
override goes
but
on
that-
forever.
That goes on forever, I mean, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So that goes on forever, so we're telling the people this policeman is going on forever, but in reality, what Dave was saying is true. You can take away from other parts of the budget, so you can lose it next year. So that's the part I don't like about these Prop 2.5s for personnel.
So I guess my only thought on that would be, again, I think it comes down to the professionalism, the officials of the town, and acting in good faith. I think everything comes down to acting in good faith. As far as this goes, you could do the same thing next year that someone did with the health agent position. Someone could put on a resident petition that says, I would like to see $63,000 funded in addition to whatever it's normal funded, so that you cover 10 positions or 9 positions in the police station. You can do the same thing. Someone could actually have an independent article that says, this is what we want. So if they see the initial budget and it's not the number they're looking at, they can ask for it to be higher on a separate article.
Mike, you had a comment? Okay, thank you.
All right,
So
so
I think the other thing to think about here is that when we're asking for these overrides, when we asked last year for the $1 million, what we came out of that meeting was, we want to know what we're spending our money on. We want to know what this $1 million is for. And I've heard arguments for and against an à la carte type option like we have here, but given what the residents said last year, I think that it is our responsibility to tell them where we really need the money and let them decide whether they really want to spend it on that or not.
Can we add how much this is to their tax base?
we're going to add that in a note piece. Vicki and I are working on that with Donna as well. And I think Clark Roll, our financial advisor, has helped us with a couple numbers. We just don't have them. They're in the note section.
Sorry. I pulled Clark's notes that he gave us. So when we met with the financial advisor, he went through some numbers for us, and basically $135,000 for the fire department would add about 21 cents per thousand. And then the $63,000 for the police department would add about 9 cents per thousand. And obviously the school, I don't know what that is at this stage.
You mean public safety? Oh. No, the school. Okay.
And then, I guess when she goes through the debt exclusion, we can talk about those
Do you want
pieces
to,
too.
you're there, do you have them? Do you want to
The
just?
debt exclusion for the fuel tanks would be 5 cents per thousand. And then, when we originally met with him, with Clark Rowell, the financial advisor, we had a figure of $10 million, so he was trying to keep it at $1 for the $10 million. I don't know what the 10.8 would be because he's trying to wrap it around, he's trying to stage it over the next couple years for when our other debt drops off, but he was trying to keep it to about $1. But I don't know what that other $800,000 in terms of the interest rate and the loans and all that, what he would come up with, so.
Right now, just over $1.
A question.
That would be 20 years. And the fuel tanks would be for 10 years. Yes.
Vicki, maybe that's the answer, but if the debt exclusion for 18 is 5 cents a thousand, and you said the life support is 21 cents a thousand?
Correct.
Is there different,
Because the debt exclusion would be based on the interest rate for 10 specific years.
just 10 years, okay.
Yes. And that's 21 cents for the second shift for the forever.
Forever, yeah.
Vicki, here's the most revised.
No, that's still 10, that's at 10.
Oh, that's still 10.
10 million, yeah,
Okay, that's fine.
yeah.
So I guess I can ask, is there anybody that is opposed to having any of these overrides on the warrant? And if not, we could continue.
I think the one thing I'd remind you as well is when you get to the town meeting, unless I'm incorrect, I believe you always have the opportunity, you can skip over something or you can pass over, I think is the official term.
Just as a quick interjection with the, we're on the debt exclusion.
Mike, would you mind going to the podium so that those at home
We're
can
only on
hear
the
you?
Prop 2.5 yet. We haven't got there. We can jump as soon as we move.
Thanks.
We all send the Prop 2, what's the
everyone all set
consensus of
with
the
the
board?
over-
I wish I had a better idea what the school wanted, that's all.
Well, I think,
I don't want anything. I just wanted to give them that option.
and I don't think they're looking, just for your reference, I spoke with Craig yesterday. I do not believe he's looking to fund that position, given the financial condition. I think he's more looking to, can we find a way to currently staff everyone we have now? Do we have to put more money in from our school choice free cash? What are our options?
One of the things that he will be cut from that budget is every supply line. Just so you know, if they're not funded with an override, every supply line will be cut out of their budget, which means that the burden of those supplies falls on the teachers. And that's an argument in itself, but just so those people at home are aware, that's what will be cut first. I mean, there's additional to that, but that's kind of a big thing.
There's one of those things that happens traditionally, in the past, I should say, is that we've sort of, you know, I'm not saying it's intended, but it's sort of a pitting of the fire versus the police versus the school. But it's not great amounts, these are small amounts, it's not, you know, several $100,000, so they won't be as bad.
Jackie,
I have a question for Vicki.
can you move the microphone so they can hear you?
Sure, thank you. I'm just wondering why, and I'm just learning from Lori in the assessor's office, why our taxes are now $15.71 per thousand,
Versus,
Versus what?
$15.20.
You mean from last year to this year?
Why are our taxes now, property taxes, $15.71 rather than $15.20?
Well, because you're going to take our new growth and your 2.5%, which the new growth was 201,933, and the 2.5% was 240 some odd $1,000, and you take that and you divide it by the valuation of all of our houses, and that's where you come up with that dollar amount, pretty much. We have 624 million some odd thousand, $624 million some odd $1,000 worth of valuation. So if you take $10,382,000, which is what our tax base is, and divide it by the cash value of all the houses, which is the L5 schedule that the assessors do on the tax rate, you come up with that particular rate.
so it's the arithmetic formula, basically.
Pardon?
Just an arithmetic formula.
Correct.
Is it based on the fact that sometimes the housing values will go down and you still have
It's a total.
The total housing?
You can only tax that amount of your levy limit. And so your house could be worth 200 and mine could be 400. Next year, yours could be 300 and mine could be 200. As long as it's the same amount, you can only tax so much.
Yeah.
And so the distribution of the assessed value gets distributed amongst the houses, but you can only tax that so much money. So if you want to know, like next year, what our increase would be, you're going to take pretty much whatever the new growth and the 2.5% and divide it by whatever the value is, and that will give you an estimate of whatever 20 some odd cents or 30 cents per thousand added to this year to increase for next year. So if you think $135,000 is 21 cents, and if you have over 500 and some odd $1,000 in new growth and 2.5% increase, then you're talking, 40 cents, somewhere around there.
Does that answer your question, Jackie?
Right, I mean, my neighbor is wondering why her taxes went up, and, I mean, I do think that we should explain this in layman's terms to the community. I mean, you just, you know what I mean, because she had a question, and it was, just wanted to.
I would tell her that she should go to the assessor's office, and they probably will give her a clearer idea than us giving a, public statement on how a tax rate is derived at.
Right, it was just a surprise to her, she didn't, because her house is paid off, and she could see the rate, where we have them, we paid our taxes through a bank, and
Yeah, and she sees it directly. And
Correct,
the
yeah.
valuation, that would be something you'd have to talk to the assessor's office about, because I'm not quite sure how they do that. So,
If there's no other questions about the override or concerns, can we move forward? Okay, Heather, we're ready to move forward.
All right, where are we on the Prop 2.5?
We're moving along.
We're moving on,
No
excellent.
opposition.
Article 18, debt exclusion, Vicky covered this one a little bit, but this was for the appropriation of $198,875 to purchase an above-ground storage fuel station and a supporting generator for the Highway Department for municipal use. This was a item that was requested to be placed on by the Capital Improvement Committee. The next item I have for debt exclusion is $10.8 million to build a public safety complex next to the Southampton Town Hall for municipal use. That to make the appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the BOS, is approved to borrow $10.8 million under chapters 44, et cetera, et cetera. Are we all set on those two? Do you guys have any questions on those two?
So we haven't taken a vote yet on the debt exclusion for the public safety complex, and we had some questions that we were wondering if you guys had considered or addressed yet. We just met with the public safety committee. They came upstairs, and one of the questions we asked them was, what is it going to cost us to operate this building once it's finished? Because as of right now, We're talking about a Prop 2.5 to keep an officer, and we're talking about putting another building into operation without having a discussion about what it's going to cost us to maintain it, who's going to take care of it, and all of those things. So they gave us a number. It was $4 per, is,
It was $3.50 to $4 per square foot.
per square foot. So
Brought you between $70,000 to $80,000, $90,000 in yearly operating expenses for a new building.
just to operate the building,
Which is higher than what it costs us to operate the current.
the two buildings
What's
right
that
now.
number?
We didn't have a chance to go through line item by line item, but their total expense items was,
It's probably less than 50.
yeah, it was probably 50 or 60. But keep in mind, once the new building is built, those other buildings will still need to be maintained at some point to keep electricity, so.
So one, I guess,
costs will be-
we wanted to know if you've had that conversation yet, because that's the conversation we've been having upstairs about it. And the other question is, have you had any discussion about what you're going to do with the other buildings? You know, I know they're talking about putting the public safety complex into use in, what, 2 years? He said 2017, was it? And if not, can you talk about the possibility of maybe creating a committee about reuse of the buildings so that at least we have a plan, or we've started a discussion of the plan? If we're going to go to the town people and say, here's the debt exclusion, we want to build the safety complex. By the way, we're also going to, here's our plan for what we're going to do with the other structures and how we're going to pay for the new public safety complex to run. So that was just something we wanted to bring up, because we haven't decided, we haven't voted how we're going to recommend this or not, but we wanted to raise those issues.
We have not had a conversation about either one of those topics.
Well, we
We've had.
Well, we have, but not,
Charlie's brought up about the reuse committee.
but not the cost of the operation
Right,
of the
well, I
new
think that's a
building.
great point.
It's
That's
a very good point.
$90,000?
Please keep in mind too, in this does get into another article, with the second shift, your utilities costs will more than likely go up. And you will have occupants in this building, while more energy efficient than the current buildings, the building will have more equipment running, it will have a higher demand than the fire station next door. So a second shift is going to add, expense costs for the year on that building as well.
Both existing and new.
Well, I'm hoping this building has more efficient facilities than currently both those buildings have, because they're atrocious right now.
And we did ask the question, what is your estimated load for the building versus what we currently have in the buildings? And they hadn't delved into that, but it may be something worth flushing out prior to, if possible.
And probably prior to the town meeting, because the first person to raise his hand and says that same thing, we're going to go, don't know. And that could torpedo the whole thing.
I was going to say, we had talked about maybe disclosing, so here's the debt exclusion, here's what we're building, and just so that you are aware, in 2 years' time, here's the additional burden that is going to be on our budget, and perhaps trying to have those numbers so that when that question's asked, we can say, and we've started working on a plan for how we're going to come up with that or work it into our budget.
Suggestion.
Heather, would the duties and guidelines of the capital committee, could that fall under the control of and decision on what to do with those two buildings after they become empty?
I don't think that's their charge. I
I
think,
don't know either. I'm just
I would say probably not. I know that my understanding is when this building was looked at, you guys came up with the Larrabee Reuse Committee, I believe. I don't see the harm.
I don't think the Larrabee Reuse Committee did anything to do with the operational budget. It's similar
Okay.
to what we have right now. And there were some hidden costs that we weren't aware of, such as, the high-tech monitoring of all our, state-of-the-art boilers and electrical systems in the building, which was an additional $5,000 or $6,000 a year that we didn't plan on, so.
I guess in one way they could ask that question, because they generally, when people fill out the form pertaining to a capital project, they do include what their soft and the hard costs are and costs for operating over the next few years. I would also recommend, the public safety complex has been really good, that if you ask them any questions, they may not know the answer today, but you have the answer tomorrow. And that is one thing they are looking for, is any FAQs. So I think that's a great question that the Finance Committee asks, is what's the cost going to be to run
It might
it?
benefit that committee to take a look at it before town meeting and come up with some ideas.
How did you leave the conversation with the Public Safety Complex Committee today?
They were looking into getting a firmer number.
Okay.
I could help with
The
that.
number they gave us was kind of like a worst-case scenario number with the $4, so they were Charlie said they were gonna look into it and see if they could get a better number in case it's raised at town meeting.
Okay.
I could help with that.
One
So-
other-
Go ahead.
One other item we brought up, and this is more, I guess, clerical.
Can you, right, thanks, Mike.
One other item we brought up, and we did discuss it with the Public Safety Committee, was just changing the language in the debt exclusion. Because you're asking to vote to appropriate $10.8 million to design and construct a public safety complex. We thought it was important that everyone knows that the facility is not designed yet. So you're not voting for $10.8 million to go stick a shovel in the ground next week. There's still a design process. The building design is not finalized, so it should be
So you're saying remove the word build?
No, to add design and.
design and
Design and
construct.
build.
But also help to put the soft cost in there too, because I think 800,000 is the refurbishing of the new facility.
Correct.
Right.
The 800,000 was the furniture and some of the other soft costs, and things in there, yes.
Didn't they put like $1.5 million or $1.7 million for soft costs?
There's $1.5 million, which covers OPM and clerk fees,
Yeah.
architectural and engineering fees, legal and bonding, and then other printing, advertising, et cetera. Furnishings and equipment was $750,000. That covered the apparatus and equipment needed for the police and the fire departments to operate. So basically the things that get bolted to the walls is kind of how it was put, so. So $9 million site and construction cost, $1,050,000 for soft costs, which are your clerk fees, AEs, legal and bonding, and then $750 for furnishing and equipment, with a total project cost of $10.8.
So it seems like the Public Safety Complex needs to have that stuff broken down for the public to see.
Yeah, I think
that
Charlie
value.
could probably present that at the town meeting to divide up. But I can go back to some of these questions. So when this was, before this building was rehabbed, I think the yearly costs were about $50,000 a year to heat this building. It was very drafty.
No, we shut the heat right off.
No, when it was being used for like, the planning board, I think, met in this office and stuff like that.
Well, no, it wasn't. The last 4 years, we gutted all the heaters. We pulled all those out, okay, and we shut the heat off in the building for like 3 or 4 years.
But the Boy Scouts were still using it.
No, they were not.
Okay.
Not those last 4 years.
But there was a cost to the building.
There was a cost in regards to electrical. That was it.
Okay.
Okay, it was minimum, but.
Back in 2000,
but-
going back
but
to
you understand
2005.
This building was mothballed for about 12 years.
Right, but I'm going back to 2005. In
Yeah.
2005, from my understanding as chairman of the select board at that time, that the yearly cost in the budget, and you can pull this out, it's in there somewhere, was about 50 grand to maintain and heat this building. So there was a cost to this building, even when it was underutilized, when the seniors were still in the basement. The senior center was still in the basement, even when you were saying it was mothballed, because they were still here. They were still in the basement with their computers on pallets because it flooded. And
They went over to the library, if you remember.
at some point, when they were doing the
They went over to
rehab.
library.
But anyways, my point being is that there was a model already shown that there was a cost to a building, being the old town hall, the second floor basically was being used by the town offices. So there was a cost to heat that. And then there was a cost for this building, and you could look at those changes in cost to get an idea of what the change is gonna be for perhaps the police station moving over to the new facility. When you look at office space being used, the square footage by the police department is what? Does anybody have that now?
I believe the public safety complex would.
But I mean, just the current office space, what they're using for square footage at this point. So I think you could look at operating expenses right now for.
Are you talking about the square footage for the new complex?
No, the current, I'm trying to get a baseline, because, yeah. Do you know the new one, but I'm trying to say, you know, what would be the savings? Because there is a cost for using a building, obviously. But you have to look at, you're not going to be using the current costs for whatever the utilities cost is for the police department, as well as for the current fire department. If you're putting in a second shift at the fire department, there is going to be a cost for heating that. So the utility costs for a second shift, as Mike was saying, is going to go up in the old building as well. So that cost may be actually less for the new building because it's going to be better insulated, it's going to be more energy efficient than the current firehouse as it is now.
I think that these are all really good questions, and we need to make the Public Safety Complex Committee aware that they need to have answers to them at the town
I'm
meeting.
trying to answer them.
I know, but I mean, you can answer them for us, but where they really need to be answered is to the people who are asking them at the town meeting. I mean,
I guess you forgot, I was actually on this committee, on the Public Safety Committee.
We discussed that with the public safety.
Okay.
And there's still a pretty dramatic change in what costs today and what that square footage would cost in the future.
But we're doubling the square footage too.
Right, exactly.
Both buildings compared to one new one.
Basically, they were saying, unless you tear down the buildings, and I don't think that's in anyone's plans, there's gonna be some minimal expense in just operating the buildings so that they don't further deteriorate. And in addition to that, some of them need repairs in order to remain standing and not to further deteriorate and cost the town even more money. So just moving into a new building from these two buildings is not going to represent 100% savings in the expense that you have there. Somebody has to look into that. I don't know if it's 30%, 70%, we don't know.
But also, once the buildings are reused, you're having the full expense back, yeah.
So I'm happy to submit all of these questions to the Public Safety Complex and even committee, and even perhaps encourage them to put together an FAQ sheet for folks both at the meeting and also previous, and get it on the website so folks have these answers.
I guess I just have one last comment. This building would not have occurred if we had all the answers to what to do with the second floor at the old town hall. I'm just saying, it's sometimes when you're moving ahead, you just have to move ahead knowing that at some point you'll have an answer, but sometimes you don't have the answer right up front. You just have to take it on faith that when you move forward, you'll have provisions to come back and address those. Otherwise, we would never have left the old town hall. I'm just saying that.
I don't think there's anyone who's not supporting this. We're just saying that we need to have all the facts so that people understand going forward what your neighbor wants to know what changes in the tax rate and why. This is going to be, it could be potentially some contributing factor in the future. I just think in the spirit of transparency, we need to give people as much information as we can.
I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point because these are questions people are gonna hesitate on voting on unless they have an answer they're comfortable with.
And we need to have a plan. No one's saying that we don't. We're not saying that we don't agree with this. What we don't agree with is not having a plan for what we're going to do with it once we have it, and what we're going to do with buildings we're going to continue to pay for. Because we seem to see a trend of let's do this without examining all the costs for what it's going to be down the road. And we're just trying to do that now instead of being forced to answer those questions, especially considering the way the budget has been for the last 2 years. And if we suddenly have to come up with $100,000 to run that building, where's it going to come from? What are we cutting to do that? So we just want to consider it now.
I think one of the other things is, following what you're saying, is debt exclusion for $10.8 million is probably something they can vote on, but if they start asking questions, how much this, how much that, if I was going to vote, I'd say, if you can't give me those answers, I'm not voting for this one, because I don't know what it's going to cost me. So it could derail the whole project. They don't have the right answers there.
We just want them to be prepared.
Right, that's a great idea.
Thank you. We can move on now. I think we're at the revolving funds.
As we get into Article 20, we've already completed the CPA piece earlier, before the Finance Committee got here. Under the revolving funds, I've asked her to give us a brief explanation so everyone understands what they are and what they're used for.
My form's a little different, but, as Heather alluded to earlier, with the new statute of Master General Law, Chapter 60, Section 15B, we can create a tax title revolving fund, which would help Donna pay for all of her foreclosures and whatnot, and we wouldn't have to take that money into our general fund budget. Because whatever she put in there, she could use in order to pay for those particular items. So that's why we want to establish that new account. The second one is a new revolving fund for the Park Commission, so that if they're going to be collecting fees, and I believe they set up a fee schedule for the new Labrie Field, they have money to put into this revolving fund in order to use it for maintenance, mowing, fences, or whatever have you that they might need to use for that fund. So we want to set up a new revolving fund for the Park Commission.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
I see the $10,000. Is that enough to cover all of their expenses?
I believe so. I will double check with Mark Reed just to make
What
sure.
happens if it's not enough?
Then if it's not enough, what will happen is we can come back, and with a joint meeting between the Finance Committee and the Select Board, we can raise that limit.
At any time during
At
the
any
year?
time during the year, correct. It would just need a quorum vote from both of those committees, and we can raise that limit. That limit is basically just that they can't spend any more than that out of that
But they
fund.
can collect
They
more
can
than
collect whatever they want,
that.
they just can't spend any more than
Did we do that with something else a couple of years ago?
We did that last year with the electrical and the plumbing because they were getting paid more than the $10,000
Okay.
in
So
that
it's just a
particular
starting
fund.
point if it needs to be
Yes.
changed again? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
The next one is for the planning board. When we met with the planning board to do their budgets, Paul Deman now is their chair, and since John Furman is no longer their chair, and he knew everything under the sun, and they were sad to see him go, they are looking for guidance from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and so they wanted to set up a separate revolving fund for that specific purpose for consulting costs, because they were going to collect fees to pay PVPC for any of those types of consulting costs, and they wanted it separated from their regular filing fees for stuff, so they knew how much it was actually costing them to for those consulting costs. So that's why they wanted to set that up. And when I spoke to Mr. Demond, he suggested a limit of $15,000, only because they don't know what will be coming in that they would have to pay out.
Okay.
And there shouldn't be anything left in there, basically. And then the rest of them are just the revolving funds that we've had over the years. They just need to get reappropriated every year by this particular board. And these limits had increased, and I kept those at that limit, the plumbing and the electrical, based on past history of what we've been paying out. So that's why those are at $15,000. Previously, they were 10, but we were paying more than that out of there. And we aren't allowed to do that unless it's approved by you guys. Then this other planning board is one that we've had for a while, and those are going to be for administrative expenses for the planning board. Like I said a few minutes ago, they wanted to separate the consultant that would take John Furman's place, so to speak, because people are still new, and so this is just for their regular filing fees and for other administrative costs, advertising for the Gazette, copying, all that kind of stuff. The ZBA is pretty much they're going to get their fees in, and they're going to pay someone to do their billings. If they have to pay for, again, Daily Hampshire Gazette advertisements, that kind of thing, they'll be paying out of there. That limit is $3,000. The Council on Aging van, basically we get receipts for the van, we get donations, and we get the FRTA grant back for whatever usage that we have, but that limit we have to set in order to spend that money out of there first, because it's a reimbursable grant, and that limit is set at $20,000. And then the dog license and control is basically for Janine, anything that's related to her dog license. She needs to get a new toner, she got new, she gets a license, she needs to send out all of her mailings, that kind of situation is going to come out of that account, and that limit is at $8,000. And the new one that we requested last year, because the city of Northampton was doing all of our weights and measures and we weren't gaining any revenue from that whatsoever, this is for the weights and measures to be renewed for FY16, and that's at $3,000 spending limit. Basically, our contract, I believe, with the state is $2,500. So anything that's left over in there, the way we wrote it last time, was that it would revert back to the general fund. And so there's all your revolving funds.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We're almost done.
All right, great. That was wonderful to sit down. So the next article, 21, transfer water department retained earnings. This was the article that we added yesterday at the request of the water department. To see if the town will vote to transfer from the water department retained earnings the sum of $75,000 for the research and development of a water system master plan. I do not have any additional information on that at this point. I'm happy to check in with the water department and have them give me a little blurb to put on the note piece as to what they mean by water department water system master plan. I imagine, based on my conversations over the past several weeks, that I think it has to do with more of the water system itself. I do not think it has anything to do with sewer, as a few people have asked me. I think if that was the case, it would be called sewer system master plan. Any questions on that article? Okay, good, because I don't know if I'd be able to answer them. The next section is stabilization funds under Article 22. These are for FY16. I did these A through Z format as well. Up top, I just gave a little piece. The following articles are requests for transfers to or from a stabilization fund for FY16. All stabilization transfers, both in and out of the stabilization accounts, require a 2/3 vote. I do not have the current balance in front of me of the ambulance stabilization fund. I believe it's 179, give or take.
No, the ambulance stabilization
Oh,
fund
sorry.
only has $25,000 plus whatever interest from last year. You're talking about the.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Which is the receipt reserve account, and that currently has $179,021. And I believe we still have April, May, and June receipts to post, which is on average $12,000 to $13,000 a month yet to be posted.
Thank you. So backing up and standing corrected, it's the ambulance fees account receipt, that's 179,021. What we started last year when we created the ambulance stabilization fund was we started putting $25,000 from this account into the ambulance stabilization account each year for the purposes of purchasing a brand new ambulance at one point in the future. Therefore, that is what Article A is, to do just that. As Vicki had said, we've already put $25,000 last year, so in another 6 or 7 years, maybe we can buy a new ambulance. Should be nice. Article B, transfer capital stabilization fund. This is $61,551 to the highway department to fund a purchase of a 2015 Ford F-450 vehicle. Again, I don't know if I stated this already or I didn't read my last comment. All capital stabilization transfers are submitted by the Capital Improvement Committee per the town's bylaws.
Will someone from that committee be there to speak to the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they will. And they'll speak to all of them. Okay. They have all the information, including how they were presented with the projects, how they calculated which one was going to be where, and how they made their decisions. They used a scoring format. On B, that was B's piece. C is pertaining to $47,000 for the library for the purchase of a heating, cooling system and related costs. D is $44,623 to the police department for the purchase of a new cruiser with a camera. E is for $9,000 to the fire department for purchase of firefighter turnout gear. F is the sum of $24,000 to Norris School for an updated phone system. I had Vicki give you the balance of the ambulance fee receipts and fees line, but I didn't give the capital stabilization amount. I think it's $225, give or take.
$223,613, and if you subtract all these items, you'll end up with $37,439.
$37,439.
Give or take whatever interest those in the next couple months.
Okay.
All right, any questions on those?
No, I have a question for the moderator, since that's the last one.
I was going to go to the budget afterwards, just briefly, but
I have a
Feel
question about
free.
the town meeting. Oh, good. So my question is, given the length of discussion that we have had on multiple occasions, I guess I expect that this might not be done in one night.
I have that
And
covered in
so-
my general
Okay,
comments.
so I'll let you go ahead.
Oh,
And you'll probably, if you don't answer my question, then.
all right. I'll be candid and brief. We had a nice meeting after the last annual town meeting. Most of you were there. You expressed concerns at how it ran. I processed them, and I don't want surprises at the town meeting, and I don't expect you to either. So I will continue to check in with authors of the articles if they wish to sit down with me and word their motions. I'm available, as I've been every year. I want to increase transparency. The counters will continue to announce the count directly to a microphone and not to the moderator's ear, so everybody is getting the information. It will be recorded, will not be televised live, because we're not set up to do that at the Norris School. Next evening, the earliest. But now that the second evening barrier has been established, we may easily go into a second evening. It works. We've tested the system. I also will entertain a motion to postpone to a time certain when requested supporting documentation for a particular article is not available. Historically, we sort of had a staring contest. Somebody forgot it, they don't have it. Person stood up for a while. Does that answer your question? No. And they sat down and we continued. So now, again, I would consider a motion to postpone that particular article to a time certain, which would be the next evening.
Would that be by majority vote?
Yes, and two-thirds, and you do a lot of that. So it would be up to the town, of course. Yes. Thank you, John. Mr. Cawley gave a challenge to ensure that we would be prepared, this was last year, in case we had a very, very large turnout, to be prepared for that again. And I took the challenge, thank you. And I will ask the town to vote for a deputy moderator on the evening of the annual town meeting. And essentially, it's a person that I'd be working with that would assist me, that would be in a second room if that was necessary. I won the lotto and ran out of the room. That person would stay, and with everyone's permission, to continue the meeting. The concept is it continues in kind, but it needs to be brought up at every meeting. So it is it isn't a permanent vote per se.
Is that just through a nomination from the floor that is?
Well, looking at what other towns do, no one's ever admitted there's been a nomination from the floor. I would not encourage it, because I would not want someone that I haven't been able to work with and who could understand my expectations for that particular evening. So
You would already have
we'll
someone
play.
chosen?
I will
Okay.
announce, yeah, thank you. Yeah, but we'll play that one by ear.
Gotcha.
For the twisting and my vision and raising hands, we're going to have everyone face the moderator. So the select board, the town accountant, the treasurer, the town clerk, the finance committee, and the town administrator will be not really in the first row, but they will be closer to the stage. So we'll proceed as we have, where the select board, by tradition, will read the motion and second the motion, and then it's tossed onto the floor. And I believe that satisfies everyone's concern. John?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If that's going to be the case, say this is where the board sits and you're up here, is the person coming up to talk in the microphone going to be in
They're
front
going
of
to
us?
be behind your table.
So it'd be behind us.
Right.
Is there a possibility of having in front of us so we can all face that person?
It's possible. We'll see what the logistics
We'll all
are.
be turning around all the time.
No, I'm going to prevent you from turning around. That's what started it. But we set up in the afternoon, and we set the TV camera, and truth be known, we work around where the TV cameras work best. So, yeah, we'll...
Seems like everybody will see the person speaking except for us.
The idea is to prevent the twisting, the turning, and the confrontation or the interplay, to keep it smooth, to keep it, you know. Oh, this has been thought out.
So when we're sitting up front, our back will be to the audience, but we'll be
Yes.
facing you.
Be like sitting in the front row.
Our back will be to the speaker too, on the microphone.
Yeah, I'm not
Why can't
sure.
we just leave it the way it was?
We're continuing to improve it. We're going back on stage. We're televised, and so to make it all...
We're not televised, we're taped, right?
Well, taped, thank you for that correction. We're taped and will be played on TV the next night or the night after. I don't know yet exactly when it'll be played.
I guess I understand your point, Mr. Moderator. I just don't know how I feel about sitting, not that I mind sitting in the front row, because I always am one to sit in the front, but, I mean, I feel like if we're speaking to an audience, and I know we're presenting the motion to you, but we're also presenting the motion to the entire group, I just don't know how I feel about having my back to everyone that I'm hoping hears me.
I understand. The motions that the select board do by tradition, your presence isn't required. You're certainly invited, and it's wonderful when we sit up front. But essentially, it's the moderator and the town clerk with 23 other town voters. And so the concept is to keep the traditions intact and to...
Well, tradition's changing, Robert.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I feel like if you're going to ask somebody to explain each one, which would be the finance committee is going to explain, the town accountant is going to explain.
It's going to be like this, Robert. We're going to stand up, turn her back to you with the microphone.
No, that's
He's suggesting you
no.
don't turn.
No, that's the idea. The idea is so you do not face the audience.
What if someone is hearing impaired and is a lip reader, so that they can't see your face?
Then you just get closer to the microphone.
Is there any room for, I mean, I guess I'm opposed to having my back turned. I guess
One concept is, we had TV, we never had TV, so we certainly introduced a new tradition. So let's try this, let's see how it works, and we'll have our traditional meeting after, and we can take a look from there.
Yeah, I disagree with Liz. I mean, I don't disagree, but if we have to have our back to the audience, okay, but I sure like to see the person speaking so that we can all, because we're going to have people speaking behind us.
John makes a good point. We'll work on that, John.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you. Definitely.
I think
Definitely.
that the board should be facing the
That's
people.
what I
We're
prefer.
chief elected officials,
We're there. I think that's, if they get to see who we are, and we get the chance to speak, they can see who's speaking. I'm not trying to say I'm above any.
No, you make a point, but there are other elected officials, fire chief, police chief, superintendent of highways, that sit in the audience, so.
This is the chief elected officials.
I always felt like when someone got up to
That's a good point, thank you.
when someone got up to explain something, no matter what it was, even when it's Mrs. Ahart to explain the CPA funds, when she's facing us and not facing the audience, I almost feel like it's rude, because those are the people that you're really trying to explain what is happening. Those are the people that you really want to understand why we're asking for it, where the money is going. And I always thought, I just feel it's kind of rude to turn your back to the people that you're trying to, for lack of a better word, convince or support your position to.
It's ruder when that system is taken advantage of and there's interplay between the speaker and somebody in the audience or somebody up front. And so the idea is to diminish that possibility.
When's the last time, just for my own?
What does interplay mean? What does that mean?
Well, somebody in the select board shouting out at somebody at a microphone, somebody who's speaking from the front, speaking to the audience, the moderator, and somebody in the audience is at the mic, and there's interplay back and forth. We've had several heated instances in my experience as moderator. Now you were a part of one. I will
I was
explain
just
that to
wondering
you
when the
after.
last time that
Well, anyway,
happened was.
that's how it's going to be. And we can see how that goes, and we can meet after, as we always do, and we'll see.
Let's put an article in the warrant, then, that says we're just gonna have the chairs moved around and we'll vote on it.
There is no voting.
No,
On that.
we'll put an article in the warrant that says the positioning of the tables.
No, that's the moderator's call. It's the moderator's meeting.
Put any article on it.
Read the law, know the law, obey the law.
Well, I appreciate the conversation
Okay.
surrounding it.
All right.
Go ahead.
The postings will be announced where they're posted. There was a lot of controversy at our special, or after, or during, before the special town meeting. People went to a particular store. It was closed. There was a bulletin board out in front. So we'll announce where the warrant is going to be posted. And one aspect further I'd like to ask, when you signed a warrant, I'd like you to consider voting to close the warrant. Last year, there was a consideration to add an article or two on a Thursday, getting dry, after you had signed the warrant. And that's not healthy, that's risky, and it'd be like a purchase order. Once you issue a purchase order, you need to issue a change order. You wouldn't issue a purchase order and ask for it back, and then make a change and then deliver it. So that's my concept.
What time does the meeting, what's the cutoff time that you would end a meeting, just to continue to the next
Okay.
day?
I'm going to work up to that because I want to mention that tomorrow evening, Wednesday, at the fire station, the safety complex committee will have a presentation, and I understand there may be some hamburgers barbecued. Monday is election. That's the first day of the town meeting, and Tuesday will be your meeting, and Thursday will be the information meeting, the 7th. Here at 7 o'clock. We have a 7 to 10. I really need some water. We have a 7 to 10. So 10 is the cutoff, but it's up to the town.
Okay.
I don't encourage it, but if we're a little ways to go, it's really up to the town.
Okay.
Somebody make a motion. I'm good?
Yeah, you answered my question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next
We don't
piece
have a
we have
meeting
to do is the budget piece. My recommendation I had made to Liz before the meeting was we are still working on finalizing the budget. If we amend the indirect costs for the transfer station, we are still going to be working on finalizing the budget tomorrow. We are pretty close. I just want to go over some basic changes. I did recommend to Liz that I thought it would be a great idea. I know the board is getting stressed out with having all these meetings, and I apologize for that, but I think it would really be in favor of the budget moving forward to have one last meeting on Monday, hopefully short, just to go over the absolute finalized pieces to the budget. Would be my... I know it's election day. People will be here. It'll be great. We'll actually have people in attendance. I'm aware. The 4th, yes, ma'am. But let me tell you really quick what we've made a few changes in the past couple of days as needed, and I know the Finance Committee is still reviewing this. It is, again, a very lengthy piece, so sometimes it takes a little more work, and it is written in a different format than we've had in the past. So some of the things we've done over the past couple of days, the town accountant, we actually added the fund so that she would be able to go to a boot camp class and actually sit for her certification next year. That comes to about $1,200 when all said and done, and that's an estimate. We did add money for, I don't know what I called it in here, GASP 34 for a fixed asset study. This is something the auditors have been on us for to get accomplished. We do not currently have a price quote on this, but we guessed it would be no less than $12,300. So that's what we've put in. The next items we have down here, treasurer software support. We actually added $1,500 to the amount for the purposes of her having the additional funding to upgrade the software. So that is in there. Some additions, we've also added on the selectmen lines, we actually have a thing called selectmen expenses for minutes. It separates out the minutes from the administrative assistant wages, having this as a separate position, someone here as a 1099, and having someone during the day, Monday through Thursday, to help there. It actually is more beneficial to the funds because we're not paying someone for 2.5 hours to hang out and wait for the meeting to begin. And they can also focus more on what they do. Other things we've changed, today we changed emergency management expenses. We originally funded it at 1,000, we funded it at 3. On the police department for communication wages, John, we funded it at 184. That was a change as of today or the other day. All my days are blurring together at this point. Moving on further, we talked about before we added a building inspector alternate line. We were still level funded for that piece, but essentially what we did was we took the $800 that would cost in the event that Tom actually takes his vacation days next year that he's allotted, to pay for someone to come in and fill in for the amount of time he's out. Education, a couple things have changed. Charter school tuition went down. It was originally on the cherry sheet for $23,317 for the assessment, and we were getting reimbursement for $4,300 and some change. It has changed to the assessment being $10,321, and we get approximately $800 and some change back. Moving on down further on the budget as we continue here, health agent wages, we had talked about putting it in one line. We did. We put it in health agent wages line, so there's no longer a clerical position. They asked for it to be combined because they didn't know how they were going to proceed as of yet, and we funded it at $35,182, which is approximately $3,622 higher than last year between the two positions. So we did increase that budget line. When you get down to library, the issue we had when we first started was the fact that we were underfunding them by $4,000 from the amount they needed to meet the accreditation requirements for FY16. We may like to level fund things, but the state does not like to level fund their accreditation requirements. Therefore, we had to put more into level fund. We actually ended up having a little bit at the end, so we thought it would be a great idea to put the incentive to actually fund them fully for their books. You actually see for the first time here, you have things broken out for you. So instead of just having wages and expenses, you have books, library utilities, and library maintenance. The idea on this piece is we can actually track further and better what we're actually spending in these lines instead of saying we spend some sort of something, and when we add up all the numbers, we'll figure it out over the next 10 years. Other things we've done here, and it's always possible I'm missing something. Actually, I think that's all on. Was there anything else, Vicki, you can think of that we did recently that I missed?
We gave Myra an extra $75 that we had left over.
I think that's it.
I think that was it.
So essentially, where we are with this is we're still looking at it.
Council on Aging.
Oh, yes. Council on Aging, we funded them at what they requested. We originally funded them at $860. We've now funded them at $1,860, which is what they requested.
Which was the level back in 2014 for supplies.
So those are the most recent changes that we're at. We actually have a summary sheet that's being worked on currently. It's just a lot of work, and we're getting there as fast as we can. My recommendation for the board is either to decide what they want to do with the warrant tonight, or, again, I would strongly recommend a brief meeting on Monday of an hour just to wrap these two things up, so that the Finance Committee has had a time to say, yes, we approve the budget, and we've had a chance to finalize everything with written and notes, and we also had a chance to get it back from Town Council. That would be my recommendation.
I concur. And if we're only talking about an hour, then I would say 7 o'clock would be an acceptable time.
Next Monday?
So Heather, there is no additional, you used up all available revenue?
At this point, we've used up all available revenue. We do have whatever we're going to do with the transfer station for indirect costs. Again, I would recommend that the board take a strong look at this, and I will give you a summary page well in advance of Monday, but I would strongly recommend that the board look and make sure they agree with whatever changes we've made. We'll summarize them for you so you know exactly what we changed from FY15, so it's immediately apparent. But again, it comes down to what the board wants to do. That's why I say this is still a draft, because we might have made the best decisions we could with the information we had and the funds in front of us, but the board may decide, hey, you know what, we're not funding fully for books. They've always got 50%, they're going to continue to get 50%.
What's that number?
50% or 100?
How much did you add?
11,500.
11,750.
I lied. $250 off. I'm very sorry.
How much went into stabilization?
Which stabilization account? Well, we have 3 stabilization accounts. One is the ambulance stabilization account to purchase a new ambulance, which has $25,000. One is capital stabilization account, which can only be used for capital projects and can only be funded
much
for
went into
capital
that?
improvement committee. 200 and, I think we said,
How much is the balance?
No, how much are we putting into the stabilization accounts and what are the balances?
we haven't, the last time we put stuff into the stabilization accounts was with free cash, based on the free cash policy.
How much are we putting into it? We're not putting any in.
With this budget, we're not putting any money in.
I think that's what Ed's asking, is like, we're not putting any money in the rainy day fund.
No, but
No.
I was thinking that, not that, you're talking reserve fund.
The reserve fund has, I think $10,000, which is what we have this year, which is working out fine.
We're discussing whether, if there's any merit to put some additional money into reserve, considering that's the only emergency fund that can be used fairly fast for something that comes up unforeseen.
We can stick whatever we get from transfer into reserve.
It's just a suggestion, and I think the board is in agreement with that.
Right.
We did toss that
We like to
around.
see it around 30 or 40,000, but we know that's not going to happen.
So why don't we consider that for Monday's meeting and
Is everyone on board with the Monday meeting at 7?
Check my schedule, I'm good,
David?
unless I get a text
Okay.
otherwise.
Going to be here anyways, so.
Okay. Ed? That would be your last day.
Last, yes.
Okay. All right, so that being the case, that's where we are with the budget piece. I think all you guys have left now is really briefly on minutes and
so I guess.
warrants.
I guess here's my suggestion, since we have warrants and minutes to approve and we have people waiting for executive session, can we go into executive session and come back into open session to approve the warrants and the minutes and then adjourn? Or-
Well, if you do
Just
that,
table them to-
theoretically, it should go on TV. I don't want to table the minutes. I'd like to, if possible, I'd like to do them because these have been hanging out for a while and they're just building up in my,
All right, so let's get going, because I know that people are waiting for us. So whoever has the warrants, if you could read them, please. In the meantime, has everyone read the minutes from April 7th, 9th, 14th, 16th, and 21st?
Yes.
Yes.
Does anyone have any
No.
comments? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from April 7th, April 9th, April 14th, April 16th, and April 21st as noted on the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Who has the warrants?
I have 2 warrants here.
Could you read them, please?
Treasury warrant, W-15-44 for $1,149,959.64.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second warrant, W-15-44A for $71.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I don't have any payroll warrants here, and I think there's,
there is no payroll. We did that last week. We're meeting every week right now, which is throwing you off schedule.
okay.
And we can pass those along. Our next meeting is May 4th at 7 o'clock, just to finish up the warrant and the budget. We have a meeting on the 5th, which will include a reorganization of the board at 6:30. We have the annual town meeting on May 19th at 7 o'clock at the North School. The Public Safety Complex is having an information meeting and a bonfire, is that true? Tomorrow.
I don't know about the bonfire.
Fire.
How about a barbecue?
They're doing a barbecue.
Well, all right,
Someone
so
said
you have to cook the
hamburgers.
food
Is that
somewhere.
tomorrow?
Tomorrow night. What time?
I didn't put it because I didn't know. I think it's at 7, but it could be 6. I would check on the website for
Check
more
the website
information.
if you'd like to convene behind the fire station to talk about a new public safety complex tomorrow night.
Question for you. The dates you just gave aren't coming up my calendar. Next Monday is May 1st.
May 4th.
First, I've
No,
got here.
May 1st is in 2 days, John.
May 1st is Friday.
What year are you looking in?
Why is my, yeah, it says 15.
So it's the 4th, Election Day,
Wow.
and then the 5th.
Are you in May or April?
I'm in May.
Anyone who'd like to support the SYA baseball and softball. There's a parade on Saturday morning. I'm sure the kids would love to have somebody to wave to, other than the lunch lady. If there are no other, can you pass those warrants down, John, when you're done? If there's nothing else, we're going to move into executive session. We will not be coming back into open session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, for number 2, to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel. For number 1, to discuss the complaints against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining. By roll call vote, please.
And you missed 9.1.2.
9.1. Number 2. Oh, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel.
And 9.13.
To discuss the complaints against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. Sorry, I like it better the other way next time.
I'll summarize it at the top.
Thanks. By roll call vote, please.
Martin, aye.
Sears, aye.
Moulton, aye.
All aye.
Thank you very much.